Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom, and in this video we're going to look at something interesting. So this is Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Haunts by Marie D. Jones. So this is an interesting nonfiction book. It talks a little bit about a variety of different haunted places and the histories behind them. Now I wished I could have gone into detail reading through this thing. I end up having to skim it because it is a very, very long book. You can see how small the writing is, and it's absolutely huge. Minus the index here, it is an entire list of further reading. It's about 368 pages, and again, it's really big. It is actually very good. I skimmed through it. Couple of things to point out. It does tell the true stories of the Winchester Mystery House and how most of its legend and absolute nonsense. It mentions that the Myrtles, which is a notoriously haunted prison, or not prison, well, to some it was, plantation in Louisiana, place that I'm kind of familiar with. I've read about it extensively, but that the historians and disagree on basically the legend isn't true. Essentially, it's one of the few that actually mentions that the story of the slave girl who supposedly poisoned her master's wife and children because she was the mistress is nonsense. So it briefly mentions that it talks about the legends. So it does a lot of stuff. Some of it's real, some of it's not. It talks more about the history, which is my interest in hauntings. So you see this stuff, I enjoy the history behind these hauntings and why these things were haunted. So I'm just going to kind of do a quick overview of the chapters it covers, just so you have an idea of what's in this. So, and it pretty much covers, it does do a little bit of background of what ghosts are. And then it talks about Hollywood ghosts. Of course, it talks about Marilyn Monroe and a lot of the old starlets and Liberace, even Elvis Presley, and various famous people who have lived and died and are haunting various places. It's pretty standard on that. It then goes into talking about movie sets, studios, and sound stages. Different movies, films, sound stages that were haunted, that had horrible things happen, where people had paranormal experiences. Interesting stuff. Then it goes into Hollywood landmarks. So it talks about different Hollywood places, various hotels, the Gilman's Chinaman Theater and things, and various theaters and event venues that are haunted because of people's deaths and killings and things. Then it moves on to historical ghosts, where it talks about different histories. Let's see if I can get a few historical ghosts, but away from the Hollywood ghosts, which are pretty standard in the sound stages. I mean, you can see there's lots of pictures, there's various different inserts, there's a lot of information here. Historical ghosts talk about a couple different things. Abraham Lincoln, various dead presidents. Woodrow Wilson, I think, is mentioned in here. Aaron Burr, the notorious vice president who killed Alexander Hamilton. It talks, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Then it goes on to talking about various plantations. It talks about Oak Alley. This is a picture of Oak Alley. I didn't experience anything there. Me and my husband were in New Orleans right before I gave the fall, January before I had my daughter, so back in 2019. So it actually wasn't, Laura's plantation down the street's actually better, in my opinion. So it talks about a couple other ones. Magnolia Plantation, San Francisco Plantation, talks about the history of various plantation homes and phantoms. I skipped the history one. Yes, for some reason, historical landmarks is just not a very long chapter, so primarily it just talks about presidents. Then it moves on to ships and lighthouses. Here, I'll show them. Talks about various things, the Titanic, of course, and hauntings. Let's see, I visited the Titanic exhibit when it came to my state when I was a teenager, and I've been to Nova Scotia. Not really an experience in the hauntings, but nonetheless. It talks about the Queen Mary, which is a ship that's currently a museum in Long Beach, California. Let's see. Of course, it talks about the Flying Dutchman, pretty common. It talks about all the history of various different things. Um, so then it moves on to various lighthouses, then vehicles, trains, trucks, and roadways. So Lincoln Phantom Train is mentioned in here. There's a couple of other ones, and it's not strictly part of the U.S., so it does some stuff, Soviet death cars, some phantom buses in London. So it does a haunted railroad stations and tracks throughout the world. I mentioned Singapore here, so it does quite a good look at some of this stuff. Bridges, roads, and caves. So this is the next chapter. It talks about various different, you have Texas bridges, and suicide bridges, and creepy covered bridges. So it talks about quite a few of those different things. It's a good look at some of the history, particularly if, say, you're traveling, you're looking at haunted places, or you just have an interest in this type of history, which is kind of where I'm at. Again, this is a library book. I have not had the time to go through this, but this is the type of thing that I enjoyed both now as an adult and I enjoyed as a teenager. So it's a good educational resource because it looks at the history. So jump through this, and it has battlefields, cemeteries, and churches. Now, I'm a big person. I love history. Otherwise, I wouldn't be interested in this book type of book. But so I have a tendency when I'm on vacation to visit old cemeteries. I just find them interesting. I might be weird. But yeah, it talks about battlefields, Gettysburg, Antietam, Civil War. Again, Gettysburg, which is the big one. It's on my list to visit. I've never been back east, really. Except for right before I left for the Peace Corps. I was briefly in D.C. for like 24 hours, and that was it. Let's see. Stalingrad. So again, it covers even European things, or in this case, Russian. And Taunton, England. Various different barracks. So, and cemeteries. And yeah, it lists a whole bunch of haunted cemeteries. So let's get out of this one. Museums, landmarks, sports, and theater. So it covers various different spooky museums, covers the Smithsonian, the Edgar Allan Poe Museum, a couple of others here, various different other places. It covers the OK Corral. Okay, so this is a piece of information. Tombstone in Arizona is a tourist trap. That's it. Most of the buildings are not historical. They've been recreated. It's a tourist trap. The only reason it still exists is because of the OK Corral. And the cat is meowing. We'll ignore her for now. It's a tourist trap. It's not like the old mining towns. If you're interested in historic towns in Arizona, Bisbee, which is a bit further south. Jerome, further north. Far more interesting mining towns. Tombstone is a tourist trap. I've been there a couple of times. But it might be fun as the kids. You have to pay to see the fight of the OK Corral. Most, again, the buildings are recreated because they fell apart and it was a boomtown. So, moving on. But it does a variety of different haunted Arizona landmarks. It brings up, I think, Williams, which is, strangely enough, if you're interested in Route 66 history, it was the last stop that was bypassed by the highway system. They also do a Polar Express there if you're in Arizona around November and December, or plan to be. It's okay. I went on it with my family when my nephew was like a baby, and as a fan of the Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg, yeah, I covered the book, I think, last Christmas. So, it's okay. Nonetheless, it covers a bunch of other places, the Southwest, where we're at, baseball fields, hockey ghosts, a variety of other theater ghosts, and then hotels, motels, inns, houses, and castles. Europe's covered in castles. Most of them are haunted. This does not go into that type of detail. It talks about the Queen Anne's Hotel, the Bourbon Orleans Hotel, which is, I'm guessing, in Louisiana. Of course it is. And a variety of other different hotels. It brings up the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, which is popular. I've seen the pictures of that place before. So, along with a wide variety of other hotels and inns, it brings up the Winchester Mystery House, uh, which no is probably not haunted. Sarah Winchester was not crazy. She was just a really, really bad architect. And she was building a mansion for family who never ended up staying in the state. And again, she was just a really bad architect. And this house is a heck of a lot smaller than it used to be. Earthquake destroyed several stories. So some of the stuff is probably, this used to lead to actually something was here. So, but this actually talks about how the whole seance, she's crazy thinking she's haunted by ghosts thing was completely, utterly made up. Not true. She didn't even die in that house, if I remember correctly. She died somewhere else. So she just never completed it. So, and she was not a recluse. Moving on. Let's see. Let's get out of this section. But it talks about a lot of the histories, and it's an interesting book to go through. Prisons, hospitals, and asylums. This is probably the creepiest part of the book. It talks about various different penitentiaries. Alcatraz, most people in America, I've never visited it. It's on my list. But Alcatraz, of course, is in here, as is Eastern State Penitentiary. If you're familiar with any sort of haunting TV shows, they have a tendency to cover the Philadelphia Penitentiary here, and more specifically, I'll get down to this one, I believe is the last one they cover. Let's see. Yep, Penhurst. Penhurst Asylum, probably one of the creepiest things on earth. Disgusting, lots of horrible things. Actually did not close until after I was born. So it didn't close until 87. A little bit of information on there. If you want to be terrified or massively disgusted, look up Penhurst. It's horrific. But it covers a couple of other things. And let's see. Creepy schools, colleges, and universities. Ohio State, Smith's College, which is kind of interesting. I have a niece who goes there as of this video. So it's kind of interesting. It's an old all-girls school, part of the Seven Sisters, which were the schools that fed into the male colleges. They were all women's school. They were the Ivy League women's schools. Smith is one of the few that's still all girls. So some of the other ones are feeding directly into the intermixed now. So Notre Dame, which I've heard of. Gettysburg has a haunted college, because of course it does. It's Gettysburg. So Penn State is mentioned here. A few others. Move on. Always kind of cool. Planes and airports. So different flights that are haunted. Apparently Denver International Airport is haunted. Heathrow's resident ghost. That's London. How you can find a ghost in an airport or experience hauntings in airports, they're insane and busy. Except for literally sometimes in the middle of the night. But that's rare. So then urban legends and creepy encounters. So this is where you get the real ghost stories and people talking about different things. So, and various different urban legends. I think that's nearly the end. No. Notorious ghosts, poltergeists, and paranormal hotspots. So, it's going to talk about things like the Almightyville horror here. So, and a couple of other things. The Conjuring, Opinion Family Story, The Sultan Prince, various different other hauntings and poltergeists that are covered here in various hotspots. The Great Amherst Mystery, tiny college in Amherst, Nova Scotia. Interesting. Never saw it. Was in Nova Scotia. Don't know if I'll go back. Nova Scotia was not impressive to me. Moving on. Alright, I think that's the end of the book. Yeah. And then it talks, here, let's see. It's another chapter, so it says being there, which I think just, various different talking about more personal experiences in different places. So that's the end of this book. It's really interesting. it's a good book to have around. I'll probably put it on my list to own. If you're traveling, if you're interested in different haunted histories and just kind of want an overview, this type of book is enjoyable for me to read if I had the time to do it, which with a small child, I do not. I have a hard time getting physical books, and being dyslexic, it's hard for me to read these things in detail. You can go back to this. You don't have to read it in, obviously, straight through. It's not that type of book. It's more of a coffee table book that you can look at and skim through as an education material. If you have a tendency to be road schoolers and travel the US, you can go and look at various different haunted tales or things. If you're looking at different histories, planning on going to Hollywood, this is a good book to have. But it's a good overview of different haunted places, not just in the US, but touches a little bit on all over the world. And it's an enjoyable read. It's something that, age range, it depends. The real littles aren't going to find this interesting. You'd have to summarize. They might be too scary. Middle grades is something you could read to them, depending on their reading level. Again, you can read it in short bits. You can read it in different sections. So probably late elementary, maybe, depending on the reading level, and up. It would be interesting to read as a family and just kind of go through some of these tales and think about some of these places, particularly if you visited them or are planning to and have an interest in that type of history. So that's really it for this review. If you like what you see, be sure to check out the rest of the channel. I don't do a lot of nonfiction. I do a lot more picture books and fictional books and series and various different films. So I do some nonfiction. We are a secular homeschooling family, so that's where my mind is at, as I said when I was looking at the book, what you can use it for. I'm also a big history nut, so that's one of the reasons these things appeal to me. But I also do a little bit of travel stuff. My daughter is really young right now, so we are slowly moving into the more homeschooling stuff, particularly the curriculums and things. That will come as she gets older and we experience them for ourselves, and I can give a first-hand account on them. So be sure to like and subscribe. Comment if you please. It helps the channel grow. And that is it. Thank you.